A young girl sits in her bedroom in Montana, staring at the pages of a glossy magazine. Models, singers, movie stars' faces that seem so far from her small-town world. Yet they sparkle like distant constellations calling her name. Her birth name was Linda Ann Hopkins. But the world would never remember her that way. Years later, she would step into an entirely different identity. One that would make her both adored and condemned. They would call her Tera Patrick. For a brief period in the early 2000s, she wasn't just famous. She was a phenomenon. Dubbed the Queen of Adult Entertainment, she graced countless magazine covers, built an empire of DVDs and appearances, and lived a life of wealth, excess, and adoration. She was the dream girl of a generation, immortalized in posters and fantasies. But what does it take to reach that throne, and what does it cost to keep it? Fame in that industry is intoxicating. But it's also unforgiving. It offers riches and recognition, but demands a piece of your soul in return. Tera's story is one of ambition, of survival, of heartbreak, and of a woman trying to find herself in an empire designed to consume her. Her journey begins not with the glitz of Hollywood or the neon lights of Las Vegas, but with a fractured childhood. A home where love was complicated, where innocence was tested, and where a restless girl learned too early what it meant to feel alone. And from that loneliness would grow a hunger for freedom, for escape, for a stage big enough to make the world finally notice her. But what happens when the very stage that gives you everything also strips you bare? Long before the name Tera Patrick echoed across magazine covers and DVD racks, there was Linda Ann Hopkins, a girl born in 1976 Montana. Far from the spotlight she would one day chase. Her childhood was marked not by glittering lights but by turbulence. Her father, of Thai descent, and her mother, an English nurse, separated when Linda was still young. The fracture left a void. Home became a place of instability. And Linda grew up feeling like she didn't fully belong anywhere. She often described herself as shy, awkward, the kind of girl who escaped into daydreams while reality pressed heavily around her. But even then, she carried a spark, a restless energy that whispered she was meant for something beyond small-town obscurity. That restless spirit turned into rebellion in her teens. She clashed with authority, skipped school, and longed for escape. At just 14 years old, she made a bold move. She left home. For most, it would have been the end of the road. For Linda, it was the beginning of reinvention. She found her way to San Francisco, where she was scouted by a modeling agency. Suddenly, this runaway teen was no longer invisible. With striking Eurasian features, tall frame, and sharp gaze, she stood out. Soon she was signed, not just locally, but with opportunities abroad. By 18, Linda was living in Tokyo, working as a fashion model. The city was neon and chaotic. Everything Montana was not. But with each photo shoot came whispers of exploitation. Photographers who pushed boundaries, agencies that blurred the line between glamour and objectification. Alone, in a foreign country, Linda learned early the price of beauty. It was here that the first transformation took place. Linda Hopkins was no longer just a girl trying to survive. She was a model, a professional, a woman who had discovered the strange power her looks gave her over the world. Yet beneath the surface, there was still fear. Fear of being used. Fear of being forgotten. Fear that the same stage that lifted her could also destroy her. That fear didn't stop her. It drove her. Because for Linda, soon to be known as Tera Patrick, escape was no longer enough. She wanted control. She wanted recognition. She wanted to write her own story. Even if it meant stepping onto one of the most dangerous stages of all. And in the late 1992, she would step onto that stage not as Linda Hopkins, but as Tera Patrick. A name that the world would never forget. By the late 1992nd, Linda Hopkins had shed her birth name. In its place stood a carefully crafted persona, Tera Patrick. The name was sleek, marketable, unforgettable, and it would soon be synonymous with a new era of adult entertainment. Her entry into the industry wasn't a stumble, it was a deliberate step. Unlike many who drifted in by accident or desperation, Tera approached it as strategy. She had seen the modeling world strip her of power, had felt the sting of being disposable. If she was going to be objectified, she would do it on her terms and she would own it. From her very first shoots, it was clear she was different. Tall, statuesque, with a mix of exotic beauty and sharp intelligence. She stood apart from the crowd. She wasn't just another face in the magazines, she was a brand in the making. By the early 2000s, Tera Patrick had become a household name in the adult world. Covers of Penthouse, Playboy, and dozens of others cemented her status as one of the most recognizable figures in the industry. She wasn't merely participating in adult films, she was dominating them. Her fame exploded. At conventions, lines of fans stretched around the block, waiting hours for just a glimpse. A photo, an autograph. Studios vied for her, knowing her name alone could sell thousands of copies. Her face appeared on billboards in Las Vegas, her name on contracts worth more than most could dream of. She was crowned the Queen of Porn, a title she wore both proudly and cautiously. But fame at this level is never clean. Alongside the wealth and worship came whispers. Whispers of jealousy from rivals. Rumors of controlling contracts and exploitative managers. Questions of how much of the fortune she was making actually reached her hands. The empire looked glamorous from the outside, but inside it was a machine designed to consume its stars. Still, Tera pushed forward. She launched her own company. It started producing, and tried to wrestle control away from the system. For a time, it worked. She wasn't just an actress, she was a mogul. Interviews painted her as sharp, ambitious, and unapologetic, a woman who refused to be boxed in. And yet, late at night, when the lights dimmed and the crowds faded, she felt it, the gnawing emptiness, the fear that no amount of fame could silence. Was she building a legacy or just feeding a machine that would one day spit her out? Because in the adult world, the crown is heavy, and the throne is fragile. And for Tera Patrick, the cracks in her empire were about to show. The higher the pedestal, the harder the fall. For years, Tera Patrick wore the crown of her industry. But behind the polished covers and flashing cameras, the cracks were spreading. She had tried to seize control of her image, her money, her career, but the adult industry is not built for independence. Contracts bound her to studios. Agents demanded their share. Managers whispered promises, then betrayed them. Fame had given her power, but also left her surrounded by people eager to siphon it away. Then came the personal storms. Tera married fellow adult star Evan Seinfeld, bassist of the metal band Biohazard. Together, they became a power couple in the industry shooting scenes, running a company and marketing themselves as untouchable. But behind closed doors, the relationship was fraught with tension, control, jealousy, and financial disputes ate away at their marriage. By 2009, the union collapsed, splashed across headlines that reveled in the drama. The public saw only the surface, a glamorous star who seemed to have it all. But in interviews, Tera began to speak differently. She admitted the toll the industry had taken on her mental health. She described feeling used, even in moments when she appeared most powerful. She confessed to nights of regret, where the wealth and attention couldn't silence the question echoing in her head. Was it worth it? By the late 2002, the empire began to crumble. Younger stars took the spotlight. The industry shifted, with online content replacing DVDs, cutting into the profits of big names like hers. Suddenly, Tera Patrick, once the reigning queen, was no longer the center of the adult world. She tried to pivot appearances on mainstream shows, interviews in men's magazines, even writing her memoir, Sinner Takes All. The book was raw, unfiltered, painting a portrait not of a goddess, but of a woman who had fought, lost, and survived. Some praised her honesty. Others criticized her for biting the hand that fed her. The glamour that had defined her peak years had faded, replaced by something darker, more fragile. Tera had been the star everyone wanted to know. Now, she was the star everyone wanted to analyze, another cautionary tale in a world that burns through its icons. Because the truth is this: the adult industry doesn't create legends. It creates commodities. And once the market decides you're no longer valuable, you're left with the pieces of a crown that no longer fits. When the lights went out, when the cameras stopped rolling, Tera Patrick faced the hardest role of her life herself. Walking away from an empire she had built wasn't easy. For years, her name alone had been currency, a brand that sold out conventions, DVDs, and magazines. But by the early 2010s, she made the decision few expected. She retired from performing. She had played the queen long enough. Now she wanted peace. She turned inward, reinventing herself beyond the image of Tera Patrick. She wrote her memoir, Sinner Takes All, not to glorify her past but to dissect it. In its pages, she revealed the exploitation, the contracts that stole her freedom, the pain that success had masked. It was raw. It was personal. It was her way of reclaiming a narrative the world had written for her. In interviews, she spoke about healing, about rediscovering her identity outside the lens. She admitted to regrets, but also to resilience. She said she wanted to be remembered, not just as the queen of porn, but as a woman who survived the machine and lived to tell her story. Today, in 2025, Tera Patrick lives far from the chaos of her peak years. She has focused on her family life, raising her daughter and building a quieter world for herself. She dabbles in entrepreneurship, podcasts, and occasional media appearances, but always on her own terms, no longer chasing the validation of an industry that once consumed her. She now seeks balance, stability, and dignity. Her transformation has surprised many. To fans, she will always be the iconic figure of the early 2000s, the face on the posters, the queen who ruled an empire. But to those who look deeper, she is something more, a woman who stepped into fire, walked out scarred, but still standing, because fame fades. But survival becomes its own legacy. When we look back at the life of Tera Patrick, it's easy to get lost in the headlines, the fame, the scandals, the titles that made her a legend in an unforgiving industry. But beneath the glossy covers and the flashing lights was a human being, a girl named Linda, who ran away from home at 14, searching for freedom, a young woman who found power in reinvention, and for a moment, conquered a world designed to consume her. Her story is not just about adult entertainment. It's about survival. It's about the hunger for control in a world that constantly takes it away. It's about the cost of ambition, how reaching the peak can leave scars that no spotlight can ever heal. Tera Patrick was crowned the queen of porn. But crowns are heavy, and hers came with pain, betrayal, and regret. Yet she did something many never could. She walked away. She rebuilt. She found peace. In 2025, she stands not as a scandal, but as a survivor. Her legacy is complicated. Yes, some will always remember the fantasy. Others will admire the honesty of her memoirs. Her attempts to warn young women of the traps she once fell into. And maybe that's what makes her story so haunting. She was both a dream and a warning. Both a goddess and a human being desperately trying to be seen. So what does her story teach us? That fame is never free. That the industries that crown their stars often destroy them. And that, sometimes, the bravest act isn't rising to the top, it's walking away and daring to start over. And now, the question passes to you. When you think of Tera Patrick, do you see the queen she once was? Or the woman she fought to become? Leave your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more celebrity stories. The rise, the fall, and everything in between.